The gift came wrapped in silver paper, and Nora Vance knew before she opened it that it was meant to hurt. Her sister-in-law Bridget had a talent for that, for finding the present that looked generous in front of company and felt like a slap in private. They were on the back deck of the Hartwell house. The whole family gathered for Gerald Hartwell's 70th birthday, 40 people in pale linen drinking things with mint in them. And Bridget had timed it so the little crowd was watching when she pressed the box into Nora's hands. "Open it, open it." Bridget's smile was wide and bright. "I saw it and thought of you, I just had to." Inside, under tissue, was an apron. A nice one, technically heavy cotton, good stitching, embroidered across the front in looping script, "The help." A couple of people laughed before they understood. Then they understood, and the laughter died into that awful polite shuffling, and Bridget put her hand to her chest like she was the one who'd been wounded. "It's a joke," she said. "God, Nora, your face. You used to cater, I thought it was funny. You're so sensitive lately." Nora had catered. That was true. 6 years ago, before her husband died, before the savings went to the hospital, and then the funeral and then the lawyers, she'd run a small catering company that did weddings up and down the coast. Now she cleaned houses and did event prep for an agency, and 3 of the 40 people on this deck were technically her clients, and Bridget knew all of it, and that was the point of the apron. "Thank you," Nora said. She folded it neatly. Her hands were steady, which surprised her. "It's well made." And she set it on a chair and walked to the railing to look at the water, because the alternative was saying something she couldn't take back in front of her daughter. Her daughter was 11, and her name was June, and she had seen the whole thing. June found her at the railing and stood close, not saying anything, just pressing her shoulder against her mother's arm the way she had since she was small. Out past the lawn, the Hartwells' yacht sat at the private dock. Verity, 52 feet of white and chrome, Gerald's pride, the thing he talked about more than his grandchildren. "I don't like Aunt Bridget," June said quietly. "She's not your real aunt." "Good." Nora almost laughed. The reason they were here at all was Gerald himself. Old Gerald, who'd hired Nora's agency for a dozen events over the years and who, for reasons Nora had never fully understood, had taken a liking to her. He was the one who'd insisted she come to the party as a guest, not staff. "You'll come and you'll sit down and somebody else will pour the wine for once," he'd said. Bridget, who'd married Gerald's son Preston, had never forgiven Nora for the old man's fondness. The apron was about that. Most cruelties are about something other than what they pretend to be. "Can we go soon?" June asked. "After the cake. It'd be rude before the cake." That was the plan. Cake, then home. It was a good plan, and it lasted about 20 minutes, which was when the Verity started to sink. Nobody noticed at first because nobody was looking. The boat was for show. People admired it from the lawn and rarely went aboard. But Nora, standing at the railing with nothing to do but watch the water, saw the stern sitting lower than it should. She'd grown up on a lake. She knew what a boat looked like when it was taking on water, and Verity was settling at the back like a tired animal lying down. "Gerald," she crossed the deck to where the old man held court, "your boat's sinking." He laughed, so did the 2 men beside him. "It's not sinking, dear, it's moored. It's down at the stern and going down further. Look at the water line against the dock. It's moved since I've been standing here." She didn't raise her voice. That was a thing she'd learned cleaning up other people's emergencies. The calmer you sound, the faster people move. You've got water coming in somewhere below. If nobody gets the pumps going, you're going to lose it at the dock. Preston pushed forward, Bridget's husband, pink from the sun and the wine. "She doesn't know what she's—" "Go look, Preston." Gerald's voice had changed. He was 70 and vain and a little drunk, but he hadn't built what he'd built by ignoring the one person in a crowd who sounded certain. "Go and look, now." Preston went, annoyed, and got to the end of the dock, and they all watched his posture change. The slump go out of him. The annoyance turned to alarm. There's water," he called back, useless with panic. "It's full of water." Dad, the cabins. How do we stop it? Gerald was already moving toward the dock, faster than a 70-year-old should. Where's the captain? Somebody call Dale. Dale's not going to get here in time. Nora was already untying the apron she hadn't put on, handing it to June, kicking off her shoes. If it's coming in through a fitting or a hose, the through hulls are below the waterline. Somebody has to go down into the cabin and find the seacock and close it before there's too much water to reach it. After that, it's just pumps. You can't go down there, Bridget said. You'll drown, let the captain. The captain's 20 minutes away. Nora was already climbing aboard. The cabin was half flooded and dark, the water cold and rising past the bottom step, and it smelled of diesel and lake bottom. Nora went down into it because she knew exactly where to look and nobody else did. Years of catering on boats like this one. She'd done a wedding on a yacht this very size, had watched a panicked captain trace a leak once and had asked enough questions afterward to remember the answers. The seacocks were the valves where the boat's plumbing passed through the hull below the water. A failed hose clamp, a cracked fitting, and the lake came in through a hole the size of a fist. She found it by feel as much as sight, the cold inflow against her hand, harder than the water around it, coming from a fitting under the galley sink where a reinforced hose had popped loose at the clamp. The seacock handle was right there, seized with disuse and corrosion, and she braced her feet against the cabinet and put her whole weight on it, and it didn't move, and then gave all at once with a shriek of metal, and the cold hard inflow against her hand went still. The water was at her waist. She found the bilge pump switch panel where she'd guessed it would be, flipped everything to manual, heard pumps cough and catch and start to labor. Then she went back up the steps into the light, soaked to the chest, hair flat against her face, and 40 people in pale linen stared at her like she'd come out of the sea itself. It's closed, she said, breathing hard. The pumps are running. You'll want a real mechanic on it tonight, but it's not going down now. Nobody said anything. June pushed through the linen and grabbed her wet mother and held on, not caring about the water soaking into her dress. Gerald Hartwell stood at the end of his dock looking at the boat that wasn't sinking, and then at the woman his daughter-in-law had given an apron that said the help, and something moved across his face that took a moment to read. It was guilt, but it was also something sharper, and it took Nora until much later to understand what it was. Gerald insisted she come inside, dry off, take one of the guest rooms to change. Bridget had gone very quiet. The party broke up the way parties do after something real happens in the middle of them. People remembered places they needed to be, gathered their things, said their soft, embarrassed goodbyes. Within an hour the deck was empty except for Gerald, Nora in borrowed dry clothes, and June half asleep against her mother on a wicker couch. My captain, Gerald said, would have lost that boat. He's 20 minutes away and he'd have walked down here and called the insurance company. He was holding a glass he wasn't drinking from. You went into the water. It's an expensive boat. It's not about the boat. He turned the glass slowly. Why did you? Nora thought about it. She was tired, and being tired made her honest. Because I knew how. And when you know how to fix the thing that's wrong, and you stand there and let it break because it's not your job, that's a kind of lie I can't live with. I've cleaned up after a lot of people who let things break because it wasn't their job. She glanced down at June. I don't want her to grow up thinking that's how you're supposed to be. Gerald was quiet for a long time. The water lapped at the dock. Then he said something that didn't make sense to her yet. I owe your husband an apology. I can't make any more. So I suppose I'll have to make it to you. You didn't know Aaron. I knew him better than you think. He set the glass down. I'm going to tell you something and you're not going to like how long I've sat on it. Come to my office Monday. Bring nothing, just come. She almost didn't go. Rich men said dramatic things at parties and forgot them by Monday. But June, who'd inherited her father's stubbornness, said, You have to go, Mom. He said it weird. And so Nora took the morning off and went. The Hartwell office was downtown, glass and quiet. Gerald sat her down and slid a folder across the desk, and what was inside it rearranged her understanding of the last 6 years of her life. Her husband Aaron had been an engineer. Before he died, before the cancer that ate their savings, he'd done contract design work, and one of the contracts had been for a marine systems company that Gerald held a major stake in. Aaron had designed a bilge monitoring and automatic shutoff system, a clever, simple thing, and had been issued a patent on it 8 months before he got sick. In the chaos of his illness and death, the paperwork had gone where paperwork goes when a family is drowning. Nobody had followed up. The patent had sat. The company licensed his design, Gerald said. It's in production. It's in a lot of boats. The royalties have been accruing into an account that nobody claimed because the inventor died and his estate never filed, and frankly because a man on my staff knew and decided it was easier to say nothing. His jaw tightened. That man no longer works for me, as of this morning. Nora was staring at the folder. The number at the bottom of the statement did not look like a real number. How much? As of last quarter, a little over $11 million. It's yours. It was always yours. It belonged to Aaron and it passed to you in June, and it should have been paid out years ago when you were. He stopped. When you were cleaning houses. When my daughter-in-law was giving you aprons. I didn't know about the apron until yesterday, by the way. I'd have stopped it. But I knew about this in the back of my mind, as a loose end I kept meaning to chase. And I didn't chase it, and that's mine to carry. Here is the part where, in a lesser story, Nora would have wept and thanked him and her troubles would have dissolved like sugar in water. What actually happened was that Nora sat very still and felt, instead of joy, a cold and rising anger. The same cold she'd felt rising past her waist in the cabin. 6 years, she said. Yes. I sold Aaron's tools. His good tools, the ones he loved, because June needed a winter coat and I was $40 short and the tools were worth $40 to the right person. Her voice didn't rise. It got quieter, which was worse. I cried in a parking lot over $40 while $11 million sat in an account with my husband's name attached to it. Because a man on your staff decided it was easier to say nothing, and you had it in the back of your mind. Gerald didn't defend himself. To his credit, he didn't reach for a single excuse. He took it. Yes, he said again, that's exactly right. And there's no version of me saying sorry that gives you back the parking lot. I know that. I'm not asking you to forgive it. I'm telling you what's yours and handing it to you, and you can think whatever you like about me while you take it. You'd be right, too. That, oddly, was what cooled the anger, not enough to kill it, but enough to think. He wasn't performing contrition. He wasn't asking to be let off. He was just sitting there absorbing it, an old man who'd let a loose end sit too long, and was now watching what that carelessness had cost a real person, and not flinching from the watching. I don't forgive you, Nora said. I wouldn't believe you if you did. But I'll take what's mine. It was never anything else. It did not change everything overnight, no matter what the cleaner version of the story would say. The money was real, but money that size doesn't arrive like a check in a card. It came with lawyers and tax filings, and a financial advisor Gerald insisted on paying for, and Nora spent a strange, disorienting month learning a vocabulary she'd never needed. There were nights she lay awake feeling like the floor of her life had been swapped for a different floor while she slept, and she didn't trust it, and she kept half expecting someone to arrive and explain it had been a mistake. She did not buy a mansion. She bought first a small, sensible house with a yard because June had never had a yard. She bought back a set of tools like Aaron's, not the originals, those were gone, but good ones, and she didn't entirely know why until she found herself in the garage one evening just holding them, and then she understood and let herself cry the way she hadn't let herself in 6 years. And she started her catering company again. Not because she needed the income now, she didn't, but because she was good at it and she'd loved it and she'd lost it to a tragedy that it turned out had quietly been paying for the rescue all along. She hired carefully. She paid more than the going rate, especially to the women working events as staff, the ones pouring wine at parties for families who handed them cruel gifts. She knew that crowd. She'd been that crowd. Bridget called, of course she called. She'd heard small worlds leak, and her voice on the phone was a confection of warmth. All that's so wonderful, and we should have lunch, and I always knew you were special. Nora let her get most of the way through it. Bridget. Yes. I still have the apron. A pause. Oh God, that was a joke. You know I'd never. I kept it. Nora was looking out the window at June, who was lying in the new yard's grass watching clouds, something she'd had no room to do in their old apartment. I'm going to keep it for a long time, not because it hurt, because it reminds me what people show you about themselves when they think you're beneath them. You showed me. I believe people when they show me now. It's a useful skill. So thank you. Genuinely. The apron turned out to be the most honest gift anyone gave me that day. She didn't say it cruelly. She didn't need to. There's a kind of evenness that lands harder than any insult, and Bridget, who dealt in the currency of veiled cruelty, had no defense against being thanked sincerely for her cruelty's clarifying gift. Bridget didn't call again. The last thing worth telling happened a year later, at one of Nora's own events. Her company was catering a charity dinner, a big one, 200 guests, the kind of crowd that had once handed her aprons. Nora didn't have to work the floor anymore. She had staff for that and a manager and a reputation. But she worked it anyway because she liked to, because you forget things when you stop doing them. She noticed one of her servers, a young woman maybe 24, with the specific tired competence Nora recognized in her own bones. A single mother, it turned out, working doubles with a kid at home, and a face that had learned not to expect much. A guest at table 9 had been unkind to her, a small public cruelty over a spilled drink that wasn't her fault, and the young woman had absorbed it with a flat, steady politeness that Nora knew from the inside, because she'd worn that exact face on a deck a year ago holding a folded apron. Nora pulled her aside, away from the floor. Table 9, Nora said, I saw. I'm sorry, You did nothing wrong. I'm not pulling you aside to scold you. I'm pulling you aside to tell you that the way that man spoke to you says everything about him and nothing about you, and that you handled it better than I would have. She paused. How old's your kid? The young woman blinked. 3, how did you? I know the look. I wore it for 6 years. Nora handed her a card, not a business card, her personal number written on the back. When this shift's over, I want to talk to you about a real job, salary, benefits, the kind where nobody at table 9 gets to decide how your week goes. I'm not promising to change your life. I'm just telling you I see exactly who you are, and who you are is somebody worth betting on, and somebody bet on me once when I'd stopped believing anyone would. She glanced toward the dining room, the linen, the chandeliers, the whole glittering room she now stood on the right side of. You build first. You keep showing up and doing the thing right even when they're cruel about it. And then sometimes somebody notices. The young woman looked down at the card, and then up, and her careful face cracked just slightly, the way a face does when it's been braced against disappointment for so long that kindness reads almost like a threat until you decide to believe it. Why, she asked, it came out small. Why would you do that? Nora thought about a cold cabin filling with water, and a folded apron, and a parking lot, and $11 million that had been quietly paying for a rescue while she went without a winter coat. Because I know how, she said. And when you know how to fix the thing that's wrong, you don't get to stand there and let it break. She went back to the floor. The dinner went on, glittering, and somewhere across the room, a man at table 9 was already forgetting he'd been cruel. The way that kind of man always forgets. But the young woman wasn't forgetting, and neither was Nora, and the card with the handwritten number was already folded carefully into an apron pocket, kept close, like a thing you hold onto because it reminds you who you're going to become.